"Stop moving," barked Officer Hayes, his gloved hand gripping the woman's curls like he was holding a rope, not a person. The electric clippers screamed to life, and the small detention room filled with the hum of power and cruelty. Amara Lewis sat handcuffed to a metal chair, wearing gray jogging clothes stained with dust and tear gas. Her breathing was calm, almost defiant, even as black curls slid down her shoulders onto the concrete. "This isn't procedure," she said quietly. Hayes sneered. "It is now." Beside him, Officer Trent laughed, his phone raised to record the moment. "Look at that wild hair. Bet it hides a lot of secrets." Amara's jaw tightened. Her voice didn't waver. "You're making a mistake. The only mistake," Trent said, "was you thinking you could talk to us like an equal." As another strip of her hair disappeared, Amara stared directly into Trent's phone lens. Her calmness unsettled him. "When the sun rises tomorrow," she said evenly, "you'll realize what you've done. And it won't be me wearing these cuffs." Trent frowned, lowering his phone slightly. Hayes chuckled, pretending not to feel the small ripple of unease that passed through the room. The room smelled of bleach and sweat. A single flickering fluorescent light buzzed above as the officers finished their mockery. 18 hours later, those same men would walk into a courtroom and face the woman they had just humiliated. Because the protester in jogging clothes they mocked wasn't a protester at all. She was Judge Amara Lewis, the very judge presiding over their sentencing, and the world was about to learn that justice sometimes wears a hoodie. The courthouse clock struck 11. In her chambers, Judge Amara Lewis reviewed case files stacked like bricks of consequence. Her walls told her story better than words. A Yale law diploma, a framed photo shaking hands with Justice Sotomayor, newspaper clippings about her landmark rulings against police corruption. At 53, she carried herself like quiet thunder, composed, unyielding, patient, but always ready to strike when justice demanded. Her clerk, Ethan, entered with coffee steaming in both hands. "Your Honor, the police union filed another motion. They're saying you can't be impartial." Amara looked up from the case file, eyes sharp. "And why's that?" "They claim you've shown hostility toward law enforcement." She raised an eyebrow. "Holding people accountable is hostility now?" Ethan shifted nervously. "They want a venue change before tomorrow's sentencing." Amara took a sip of coffee, her expression unreadable. "Denied. They've delayed justice long enough." She turned back to her desk. Two thick folders lay open, State v. Hayes and State v. Trent. Each contained years of abuse, complaints buried under red tape, 17 civilian reports against Hayes, 14 against Trent. Not one had been fully investigated. Her phone buzzed. A text from her daughter, Lila. "Mom, protests downtown are getting ugly. Please don't go jogging there today. Love you." Amara smiled faintly and typed back, "Don't worry, baby. I'll stay cautious." Justice has its own protection. She slipped her phone into her bag, unaware that by nightfall that same bag would lie on the jail floor, its contents spilled like broken trust. Across the city, at the Westbridge Police Precinct, Officers Hayes and Trent were gearing up for another protest shift. "You hear who's sentencing us tomorrow?" Trent asked, adjusting his vest. "Yeah," Hayes muttered. "Judge Lewis, another bleeding heart liberal who hates cops." Trent chuckled. "She'll probably give us community service and a lecture." "Not if she doesn't make it to court," Hayes joked darkly. They both laughed, the kind of laughter that smells like invincibility. They'd done this before, laughed before shift briefings, mocked complaints, falsified reports. It was routine. Neither of them knew that fate was already moving to collect their debt. By early afternoon, Judge Amara Lewis closed her files, exchanged her robe for running clothes, navy sweatpants, a faded Princeton hoodie, running shoes. She tied her curls into a bun. She looked like any middle-aged woman trying to squeeze a jog between meetings. But behind those calm brown eyes was a woman carrying decades of truth no one wanted to hear. Outside, downtown Brookhaven was alive with tension. Protesters filled Liberty Square, holding signs that read, "Accountability now." No one is above the law. Police lines stood like blue walls, shields raised, expressions blank. Amara adjusted her fitness watch, unaware that a few blocks away, the same two officers whose files she had just reviewed were responding to a dispatch. "All units, crowd control at Liberty Square." Authorization for aggressive intervention granted, Hayes smirked. Let's clean up some mess. Trent grabbed his baton. Maybe we'll run into that judge's little protesters. As Amara began her jog along the plaza's edge, neither side recognized the other. The woman in the hoodie and the men in uniform were about to meet, and history would remember what followed. The first tear gas canister exploded near the fountain. The crowd screamed, scattering like startled birds. Amara coughed, eyes burning. She dropped her phone and stumbled toward the sidewalk, trying to get clear. Through the haze, a voice thundered, "Disperse immediately or face arrest." It was Hayes. His voice was amplified through a megaphone, distorted but commanding. Amara tried to wave her ID, coughing. "Officer, I'm not part of the protest. I'm just, hands where I can see them," Trent barked, advancing. She froze, bewildered. "Please, I'm heading to my car." Hayes grabbed her wrist roughly. "Resisting arrest already? Big mistake." "I haven't resisted anything," Amara said firmly. Trent's smirk widened. "Oh, we'll see about that." They slammed her against the patrol car, the sound of metal and injustice echoing together. Her bag hit the pavement, spilling papers, keys, and a small recording device Lila had given her after the last round of threats. It blinked red, still recording. Trent looked down at her expensive running shoes, her calm tone, her vocabulary. "What's a lady like you doing here?" "Living in the same city as you," she replied. That calmness, it was worse than defiance. As they cuffed her, she whispered quietly, "Verify your facts before you ruin your lives." Hayes laughed. "Lady, you don't even know who you're talking to." Neither did he. The door to the county detention center slammed behind her with a metallic echo that seemed to swallow every ounce of dignity in the room. The fluorescent lights flickered as if they too were uncomfortable with what was about to happen. Amara sat in a row of new arrestees, students, protesters, and frightened bystanders who had been caught in the chaos. Most were young, shaken, and bruised. She sat straighter than all of them, her calm presence oddly magnetic in the noise of panic. Officer Hayes filled out paperwork lazily at the intake counter. "Disturbing the peace, resisting arrest, assaulting an officer," he recited. Trent snorted. "Real menace to society right here. Thinks she's special." Amara lifted her chin. "I have the right to a phone call." Hayes smirked. "You'll get your rights when we're done checking for contraband." The intake clerk, an older man named Daniels, looked uneasy. He had processed hundreds of people, but something about her voice made him pause. It carried the weight of authority, like someone used to commanding a courtroom. "Ma'am," Daniels said gently, "it's standard procedure to check for concealed items." Amara nodded, calm. "I'm aware of the procedure, Officer Daniels. I helped write the policy when I chaired the County Justice Review Board." Hayes froze mid-step. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," she said evenly. "And if you know your own rules, you'd realize you're about to violate every one of them." Trent walked to a locker, yanking out a pair of electric clippers with theatrical flair. "Guess we're about to update those rules, sweetheart." Daniel's eyes widened. "That's not, sir, hair searches aren't permitted for misdemeanor." "New directive," Hayes interrupted sharply. "Counter-terrorism protocols. Now stand aside." The clippers whirred to life, loud enough to drown out the whispering detainees. One young man lifted his hidden phone, recording through the bars. "They're about to shave her head," he whispered. Amara closed her eyes, inhaling once, steady and deep. "Proceed," she said softly. Trent grabbed a fistful of her curls. The first pass of the clippers sent strands cascading to the floor like dark rain. The others in holding gasped. "You see this?" Trent said to Hayes. "Every time I do one of these, they all go quiet. It's about power." Amara opened her eyes and met his. "Power," she said slowly, "is what you lose when people start filming." Hayes scoffed, but his hand faltered. "You think anyone cares about some protester's video?" Amara's lips curved slightly. "I think by morning the world will." Daniels took a step back, realizing he'd seen her before. Not here, but on television, speaking from behind a mahogany bench. His clipboard slipped from his hands. "Wait," he whispered. "Ma'am, your name, it's Lewis, Judge Lewis?" Trent stopped cutting. "What?" Daniels pointed to the intake form. "Judge Amara Lewis, Superior Court." Silence fell so heavy it choked the air. The buzz of the clippers lingered like an accusation. Hayes laughed nervously. "That's not... can't be... Amara met his gaze squarely. It is. And tomorrow morning at 9 you were scheduled to stand before me for sentencing. Trent dropped the clippers. They hit the floor with a sharp clatter. The detainees behind the bars erupted in disbelief. Phones came out, flashes blinked. Oh my God, one woman said. They arrested a judge. Daniels backed toward the intercom. Control room, we've got a situation down here. Hayes's face drained of color. This is a mistake. Amara's voice cut like a verdict. The mistake, she said, was assuming my skin, my clothes, and my silence meant I had no power. For a moment, no one breathed. Then a distant voice crackled over the radio. All units, be advised. Judge Amara Lewis reported missing. Last seen jogging near Liberty Square. Every officer in the room went still. Daniels stared at the booking photo still fresh on the screen. Amara's half-shaved head and steady eyes. He whispered, Dear God, what have you done? Hayes stumbled back. We can fix this. We'll delete the footage. Well, you can't delete witnesses, Amara said, and you can't delete justice. From the cells, someone shouted, We're live streaming this. The tension broke like glass. Hayes lunged toward the bars, barking threats, but it was too late. The internet already had the story. A judge humiliated, a system exposed. Within minutes, social media would ignite like wildfire. But in that room, only silence reigned. The silence that comes when the truth finally takes a breath. Outside, night fell over Brookhaven, but the city didn't sleep. By dawn, the world would know the name Amara Lewis, and for the first time in years, the people would believe justice might actually fight back. The next morning, in her chambers, her empty chair sat waiting, its black robe draped over the backrest like a flag of unfinished business. By sunrise, Brookhaven was trembling under the weight of its own secret. A video, grainy, raw, and impossible to deny, had flooded every corner of the internet. It showed two officers laughing while shaving the head of a calm, handcuffed woman. The caption read, They humiliated a protester. Turns out she was a judge. Within hours, the footage had millions of views. Every major network carried the story. Hashtags exploded across timelines. Justice for Amara. The judge they shaved. Accountability now. In homes, in coffee shops, in the courthouse cafeteria, people were whispering the same question. How could this happen? At 4 a.m., Amara sat on her couch, a wool blanket draped around her shoulders. Lila, her daughter, knelt beside her, gently adjusting the scarf covering her mother's shaved head. They turned you into a spectacle, Lila said softly. But you're going to turn this into history. Amara's eyes were steady. They thought humiliation would silence me. It gave me a microphone instead. Her phone buzzed every few seconds. Messages from lawyers, judges, reporters, and strangers around the world. A text from a federal colleague read, Stand strong, you speak for all of us now. Another from an unknown number simply said, Your courage gives me hope. My brother died in custody. Thank you. Across town, in a dim precinct office, Officers Hayes and Trent sat in silence, stripped of their badges. Their union attorney, Frank Kelman, paced behind them, sweating through his suit. Do you two understand what kind of storm you've unleashed? Kelman snapped. This isn't some drunk in a cell. You humiliated a judge on camera. Trent buried his face in his hands. We didn't know she was just jogging. Kelman slammed the desk. You didn't care who she was, and now the whole world does. Outside, protesters gathered by the hundreds holding candles and signs. One banner read, If a judge isn't safe, who is? By mid-morning, federal investigators arrived at the precinct. Files were seized, evidence logged, and the department's walls of silence began to crack. Meanwhile, in Amara's living room, Agent Sophia Carter from the Department of Justice sat across from her, spreading documents across the coffee table. Your case, Carter said, isn't isolated. We've been tracking similar complaints across 5 precincts. Your arrest might expose an entire network of misconduct. Lila folded her arms tightly. You're saying this was planned? Patterned, Carter replied. Officers targeting minorities under the guise of contraband searches. Your ordeal gave us the proof we needed. Amara studied the files. Photos of victims, men and women, young and old, filled the pages. Some were smiling, some were bruised. She recognized one face, a young teacher who had written her months ago, begging for a case review that never reached her desk. "How many victims?" Amara asked quietly. 43 confirmed, possibly more. Amara's hand trembled slightly, then steadied. "Then we'll make this bigger than me. Every one of them deserves justice." Lila looked at her mother, a mixture of pride and fear in her eyes. "Mom, they'll come after you for this." Amara smiled faintly. "They already did. I'm still here." By evening, her name had reached beyond the nation. International headlines lit up. Judge humiliated by police turns tables on her abusers. Justice shaves back. Brookhaven's reckoning. But not everyone wanted accountability. At the police union headquarters, Frank Kellman was already crafting a counter-narrative. To all media outlets, his email read, "Judge Lewis's political activism compromised her neutrality. Her presence at a protest proves bias. My clients acted lawfully." He pressed send, satisfied. Across his desk, a colleague muttered, "Think anyone will believe that?" "Enough will," Kellman replied coldly. "Truth doesn't matter if you shout louder than it." By the next morning, headlines split down the middle, some praising Amara, others questioning her integrity. Anonymous threats flooded her inbox. "Step down before you're forced down. Next time we won't stop at hair." Lila's fear turned into anger. "We need to report these." "We will," Amara said. "But not before I finish what they started." She stood, walking to the mirror. The scarf slipped from her head. Her reflection stared back, shorn, scarred, but unbroken. "They thought they were cutting me down," she whispered. "They were carving out the truth." Outside, a crowd had gathered again. News vans, camera lights, chants filling the air. The city had chosen sides, and the courthouse was the battlefield. Ethan, her clerk, rushed in. "Your Honor, press conference in 30 minutes, they're all waiting." Amara nodded. "Then let's give them what they're waiting for." When she stepped onto the courthouse steps, silence rippled through the crowd. The cameras clicked. Her voice carried clear and unwavering. "They took my hair, my freedom, my identity for one night. But what they truly exposed is a sickness that's lived in our system for decades. This isn't just about me. It's about every person who begged for justice and was told to be silent." The crowd erupted. Cheers, tears, chants for reform. Inside the precinct, Hayes watched the broadcast through a reinforced glass window. Trent muttered, "We're dead men walking." Hayes shook his head, face pale. "No, we're examples." And far above them all, in her chamber, Amara Lewis was becoming something no one expected. Not just a judge, but a movement. Night fell again, but the courthouse never slept. The building glowed under the press lights like a monument on fire. Reporters filled the steps, microphones thrust toward anyone who might say her name. Inside, Amara worked with Agent Carter and a growing circle of allies. The walls of her office were now covered in timelines, photos, and names. Officers, lawyers, politicians. The web of corruption stretched farther than anyone had dared to imagine. Carter spoke quietly. "We traced the harassment messages to burner phones bought with precinct funds. They've been coordinating intimidation campaigns for years." Amara's jaw tightened. And every message used language only police insiders would know. They wanted us to know it was them. Her clerk, Ethan, looked up from his laptop. "We also found payment transfers from a private security company tied to the union. They've been using it to funnel hush money to victims who didn't file formal complaints." Lila walked in with coffee and a look that mixed exhaustion and defiance. "Mom, the fund you started, Justice for the Silenced, hit $1 million overnight. People are donating from 40 countries." Amara gave a faint, weary smile. "Then it's time to use it. We'll offer every victim free legal representation." Her phone buzzed again, another unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A distorted male voice said, "You think you can burn us down? Judges can be replaced. Daughters too. Then a click. Lila's face drained of color. They know about me. Amara set the phone down carefully. That call just earned them a federal charge. Carter leaned forward. We'll assign agents to protect both of you, but be ready. When we file, this department will go to war to save itself. Then we'll give them a war of evidence, Amara said. 3 hours later, her office filled with new faces, lawyers from the ACLU, analysts from the Justice Department, and Professor Raymond Ellis, a constitutional scholar who had once taught Amara. This isn't local corruption anymore, Ellis said gravely. It's systemic coordination between unions, chiefs, and politicians. You've opened a door none of us can close. Amara paced the room. Then we don't close it. We walk through. On the screens, spreadsheets showed years of forged overtime claims and case reports rewritten to erase abuse. In the center, 2 names appeared again and again, Hayes and Trent. Carter zoomed in on the timestamps. They falsified arrest logs on the same nights as multiple assaults. They've been protected every step of the way, Lila whispered. Why them? Because they're useful, Amara said. They do what others are afraid to. They enforce fear. An email alert pinged on Ethan's screen. Subject: You're making a mistake. Attached were photos. Amara leaving her house, Lila at her law office, both taken from a distance. Ethan's hands shook as he turned the laptop around. Carter moved instantly. We'll trace the sender. Amara's voice was calm, but her eyes burned. Every threat is another confession. Outside, the noise of protesters rose. Hundreds had turned into thousands. A sea of faces filled Liberty Square, holding candles that looked like stars. They weren't shouting anymore, they were singing. The sound carried through the courthouse walls, steady and defiant. At the same hour across town, in a smoky bar, Hayes and Trent sat with Frank Kelman. News of their suspension had turned to talk of indictments. Kelman poured himself another drink. We can still fight this. Claim misidentification, procedural overreach. Hayes glared. She's got recordings, Frank. Her words are on every screen in America. Kelman leaned closer, whispering. Then we make her the villain. Push the story that she planned this, that it's political theater. I've already got media contacts lined up. Trent slammed his fist on the table. She was just jogging. How the hell do we spin that? You underestimate how much people want to believe their protectors are innocent, Kelman said. Feed them a reason and they'll swallow it. Back at the courthouse, Amara's security cameras caught headlights sweeping across her lawn. A dark truck idled for 10 seconds before speeding away, tires screeching. Lila peeked through the curtain. Mom. Amara joined her, staring into the darkness. They're getting desperate. By morning, a new leak hit the news cycle. Emails from the police union chairman instructing local media to reframe Judge Lewis as biased. The proof came from within the department itself. When reporters shouted questions outside her home, Amara faced them head-on. If they call me biased for demanding fairness, then bias is the price of justice, she said. Inside, Carter's team assembled the last piece of evidence, recordings from an undercover officer named Detective Reese. She'd been embedded in the union for nearly 2 years, pretending to be one of them. Now she sat across from Amara, placing a small drive on the desk. They planned everything, Reese said. Your arrest, the smear campaign, the threats. It's all on here. Lila stared at her. You risked your life to get this? Reese shrugged. Some risks are worth taking. They made me watch what they did to other women. I wasn't going to let it happen again. When they played the files, the room went silent. Hayes's voice filled the speakers, laughing. Even if she's someone important, who's going to stop us? We own this city. Then Trent. If she talks, we'll ruin her family first. Lila covered her mouth. Amara's eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. Then we'll ruin their myth of power instead. Agent Carter stood. We're ready to move. Warrants will go out at dawn. But you should prepare yourself, Judge Lewis. Once this begins, there's no safe place left. Amara looked toward the window where protesters still sang. There's never been a safe place for truth, she said. But there's always been a right one. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the sound of sirens through the streets. Somewhere in the distance, the first steps toward reckoning had begun. Dawn came dressed in gray. The air outside the courthouse was sharp and cold, Yet thousands stood shoulder to shoulder, breath fogging the early light, eyes fixed on the tall building where justice was about to wake. News vans lined the streets. Banners waved. The city pulsed with the sound of one word chanted over and over: justice. Inside, agents moved with silent precision. Warrants were served before sunrise. Officer Hayes was pulled from his apartment still wearing yesterday's clothes. Trent tried to run but didn't get 10 steps before being pinned to the ground. Their phones, files, and private drives were bagged and logged. At police headquarters, Frank Kelman's office door splintered under a federal badge. He sputtered something about legal immunity as he was handcuffed. The chairman of the union was next, dragged past a row of cameras flashing like lightning. Every lens caught the same image. Men who once thought they could control the story now trapped inside it. By 8:30, the courthouse doors opened. Judge Amara Lewis entered in her robe, her head uncovered, her short curls glowing under the fluorescent light. The crowd outside erupted into cheers that rolled through the marble hallways like thunder. She paused at the entrance of the courtroom, drew a long breath, and stepped in. The gallery was full. Lawyers, reporters, former victims, citizens. Some stood as she passed, others wept quietly. The bailiff called the room to order. Hayes and Trent were seated side by side in orange jumpsuits shackled at the wrists. Their faces had gone from arrogance to hollow disbelief. Across from them, Agent Carter and Detective Reese organized evidence displays, every file a nail in a coffin of corruption. Amara's gavel struck once, clean and final. Court is now in session. Defense attorney Kelman rose immediately, face drawn and pale. "Your Honor, due to your personal involvement, I motion for recusal." "Denied," she said. The gavel struck again. When justice has been mocked, the most impartial act is to face it head on. Carter stood. "Your Honor, the prosecution submits Exhibits A through F, body camera recordings, financial records and communications implicating the defendants in repeated civil rights violations." The first video filled the screen. It showed Hayes and Trent in the booking room, laughing as the clippers buzzed. Amara's voice from that night carried through the speakers. "Verify your facts before you ruin your lives." No one in the courtroom moved. Trent's hands trembled. Hayes shut his eyes, as though if he didn't look, it might disappear. The next clip rolled, audio from their bar conversation 3 days later. Hayes's voice. "We made her look like every other nobody." Trent's laugh followed, cruel and unmistakable. The words hung in the air like smoke. From the gallery came muffled sobs. A woman stood up, one of the earlier victims. "That's what they said to me," she cried. Another voice joined hers, then another, until the whole room was murmuring stories that had been buried for years. Amara waited for the noise to settle, then spoke, her voice low but carrying. "This court hears you." One by one, the victims testified. A teacher beaten for asking why he was stopped. A nurse stripped during a false contraband check. A teenager whose hair had been shaved as punishment. Every story landed like a blow, each one driving the truth deeper into the record. By the time Carter presented the last exhibit, Union, emails instructing members to intimidate activist judges, the courtroom's silence had turned from disbelief to collective fury. Kelman tried one last defense. "Your Honor, my clients were following department protocol. Any mistakes were crimes," Amara cut in. "Say the word that belongs to them." He hesitated. "Crimes," he whispered. Amara looked from Hayes to Trent. "For years you wore a badge that symbolized trust. You used it to humiliate, to threaten, to destroy faith in justice itself. Today that ends." She lifted the sentencing document. "Officer Hayes, for assault under color of law, falsifying reports and conspiracy, you are sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Officer Trent, for the same crimes compounded by evidence of sexual abuse and intimidation, you are sentenced to 15 years. Both without parole," Trent shouted. "This isn't justice. This is revenge." Amara's gaze didn't waver. Justice and revenge share one difference. One restores what was taken, the other takes more. "I am here to restore." The gavel struck for the last time. The sound echoed across the hall, through the open doors out into the crowd. Outside, thousands erupted into cheers and tears. Reporters shouted updates. Phones lifted high to capture the moment. On the courthouse steps, Amara walked into the sea of people. Lila joined her, slipping her hand into her mother's. The cameras zoomed in as Amara faced the crowd. "They tried to strip away my dignity," she said. "But dignity isn't given by uniforms or titles. It's earned by standing when they tell you to kneel." The crowd roared. Signs waved high. For Amara. For justice. For all weeks past. The city transformed. A new police chief, former Detective Reese, announced sweeping reforms, mandatory cameras, civilian oversight, retraining from the ground up. Victims' cases were reopened. Officers across the country watched and took note. A new bill passed in Congress, the Lewis Justice Reform Act, making it federal law that every act of abuse under the badge would face automatic review. Newspapers called it the rebirth of accountability. One evening, months later, Amara returned to her chambers alone. The walls were lined with letters, some from judges abroad, others from people she'd never met. She sat at her desk, light spilling across the wood, and opened the latest letter. It read, "Because of you, I reported what happened to me. I thought no one would listen. Now they are." She folded it carefully and smiled. The city outside was quiet, resting after its long storm. Her phone buzzed. A message from the International Criminal Court. "We request your counsel on judicial independence and human rights enforcement worldwide." Amara looked toward the window where dawn light was breaking again over Brookhaven. "Wherever justice is still silent," she murmured. "That's where I'll go next." She stood, put on her robe, and walked out of the chamber, not as the victim they once tried to break, but as the voice they could never silence. The world hadn't just witnessed justice served. It had learned how to demand it.